February 27, 2012. Afghanistan. Past Reflections 5. After all the weeks of travel and downtime, the day had at long last come. Not that I was waiting for it with great positive anticipation, but the fear of the unknown/unexpected was getting to me. I was ready to get it over with, dive in head first so I can get into the right state of mind and make it back home safe and sound. The countless hours I have spent playing war video games like Call of Duty was nothing compared to the realness of war today. No one wants to die on either side. There is no respawning if you get killed, and there are no hearts you can collect to bolster your defense and refill your health bar. I would often compare war today to the wars of old, saying that I could have never fought in a real war like World War I or II. How did they do it? How did they cope? My maternal grandfather actually fought in World War II, a fact that I would have liked to discuss with him, especially after my return home. He was such a mysterious man, but I loved him. He died when I was about 9 or 10 years old. I never got to talk to him man to man, something I would have enjoyed because he had so much to offer. So it was the last day. We packed our things, got our briefing from the commander, and prepared to leave. We have traveled so much by this point, but this time was different. You could feel it in the air. We had on all our gear, helmet, body armor, with all our magazines of extra ammunition, the works. It was real. We're walking up with our bags, and with our M4s in hand, we see the helicopter. I can't remember or never learned what type of chopper it was, but I believe it was a Chinook. There were not too many of us, so the capacity didn't need to be too large. I was kind of in the back of the line, so I was one of the last ones seated near the back, but would be one of the first off. I sat and took a look around at all the guys. It was quiet. No one was speaking. The only sounds were that of gear being rustled around to provide space and a bit more comfort. But even those sounds were drowned out by the silence. The mood shift was obvious. We had spent so much time just relaxing and waiting, we forgot what we had come here for. Oh yeah, to fight. The good times were over, I thought. I could practically reach out and touch the tension in the air. It was palpable. We were told to use our ear protection for the flight over because it's loud in the chopper. All you could hear was the buzzing of the propellers and inner workings of this flying machine. It wouldn't have mattered. No one wanted to talk. We wanted to save our last moments of safety before all bets were off. We were heading to our site called VSP Puze, Village Stability Project, that the Special Forces were heading up. The SF guys there were Marines, and they were all cool as hell, but I'll get to that shortly. As the flight started, we all just sat there quietly, waiting. I had no idea what to expect. I couldn't see anything in the chopper either. It's like being told to wait somewhere with no timeline on how long or what's going to happen at the end of that timeline. My mind flashed back to the day we arrived in country and we went to the range to make sure our sights and our weapons were still locked in properly and they hadn't shifted or anything like that. Now, usually when you do the range qualifications, there are all these safety precautions and whatnot because big army soldiers are generally stupid, meaning people do dumb shit and get hurt. So going to the range is usually an all-day affair and it's tedious. With these SF guys running the range, they enacted, quote, big boy rules, meaning you be responsible for yourself by having discipline not to shoot your buddy to your left and right. No directions, no instructions, no hand-holding. Load your weapon, fire when ready, and retrieve your target and make sure your grouping is tight. People walking down range while others are still shooting was weirdly badass. I have a new respect for special forces. Since I like to think myself to be reasonably intelligent, this is a group I felt like I would jive well with. So we qualified that day in record time and went about our business. Flashback to the chopper and I think to myself, big boy rules. The second I step off this chopper, something could happen, and I would have to react plain and simple. No hand-holding, no directions, and no instructions. Just acting on what I have trained to do. The flight was about 1 to 2 hours. I can't remember because time just seemed to flow differently during that experience. Our chopper lands and the back door opens. I feel my grip tighten on my M4 as if I am walking with a woman holding hands, and we walk past some questionable characters. Loose enough to guide comfortably, tight enough to maintain a firm connection at all times. A delicate balance. We begin to step out and I see the sky had finally had some blue in it. It was a crisp early morning, probably around 50 degrees. I could see people off in the distance here and there. Every set of eyes I saw caused a slight reaction in me, loosening and retightening my grip, my head on a swivel. The next moment, I see the front gate open and a bunch of guys wearing the same uniform as me come out in a line, bags in tow, smiles of relief, some with tears and red faces. They were full of emotion and so happy to be free and finally heading home, back to family and friends, wives and children. I was happy for them. "Good job, brothers. You all can rest now. We'll take it from here," I said with my glance, being careful not to lose focus for even a moment because I knew we were most vulnerable during that few minutes of transition. However, I wanted so badly to ask one question. What was it like? I didn't have to wait long for my answer because I would soon find out from the Marines who stayed behind. As we got into the gate, I looked back and saw the guys whose post we are now manning. You could feel the joy, the elation emanating off of them, and suddenly a rush of sadness fell over me. Or was it jealousy? Or even envy? At this point, it's impossible to tell, but it was like an amalgamation of all three. I wanted to be back on the Chinook. I wanted to go home. I even missed the guys, my fellow cooks. You see, we didn't fly together since we all had different sites to go to. Every time one of us left, it was an emotional thing. Remember, I didn't particularly like some of these guys prior to the deployment, but when someone's time came for him to head to their side, it was seriously emotional. It's so funny because I haven't thought about this since that time all those years ago, yet the emotions are flooding my eyes even now. Stay safe out there, man. I'll be praying for you. That was the general sentiment. It hurt being separated from my group, and up until that point, we all relied on one another for support and understanding. For some reason, I especially remembered Cheery's face, his eyes. He was a young guy with a wife and a son. He was trying to be strong, but the fear was there. He wasn't fooling me, not that he was trying to. Now we would have to go off and forge new friendships with a bunch of guys who more or less didn't care about us. It was heartbreaking, but we had no other option but to persist. We got in and started dropping our bags off in these little houses that the previous guys built. They were pretty nice, all things considered, and they were even decent-sized beds. They were a lot more comfortable than the cots, so that was a nice surprise. Now, besides all the thinking I had been doing up to this point, this is where I had gotten some solid information on what to expect, because more than anything else, that's what we wanted to know. The reason that the last group was so happy to be leaving was because that region of Afghanistan I was in was historically the most kinetic one. The Special Forces guys told us that once fight season started, that they were attacked every single day. Every day. It's better to know what's going to happen, but boy does it really put tension on your mind and body. Fight season? I said to myself. Like there's a literal season when they start attacking? Apparently the leader of this group doesn't want them fighting during the colder months. That makes sense because they are all ill-equipped to fight in such conditions. Since they use guerrilla tactics, they wouldn't be effective at all if things freeze up and so on. So they simply wait for spring. It was such a strange thing to learn, but obviously it's better to know what to expect. After sitting with the Marines, I felt so much better about our mission there in Pouze. They were prepared, trained, but most of all, they had the experience in spades that I and some others lacked. I felt good when those guys smiled or were generally relaxed because that put me at ease, as if to say with a glance that everything is okay, try not to worry. Later on, during those first few hours of our arrival, we got a tour of our base, and man, it was something to behold. The first word that came to mind was poverty. February 27, 2012, Afghanistan. Past Reflections 6. It's not a surprise that I felt that way while getting a look around. I mean, this was an impoverished country due to what was going on. The 1% has all the money and resources, while everyone else is living in mud huts and driving an entire family of 5 on a single dirt bike. That's not even remotely a joke. I would see it all the time during my deployment. After getting the initial looks around, I went around the base and took pictures with my brand new, freshly outdated iPad. First off, they showed us the bathrooms, which weren't rooms where you bathe at all. Since there were no women there, all they did was dig a small hole in the ground, force some PVC pipes down into it about 3 feet or so, and then boom, we peed in that tube. Yep, kinda gross, I guess, but it gets the job done. Really, the only problem I had with it was the fact that it started to smell. Oh my goodness, women would have been so grossed out by that. I already know. When the smell got too bad, all we would do was close up the hole and dig a new one. Glorious man ingenuity. Now, you may have been wondering where we would defecate. The poles, they were amazingly versatile, you know. Ha, kidding. We was going to a corner and okay, double kidding. They had these fancy little bags with everything you need inside, and I am post deployment dubbing as shit kits because I can't think of their regular but still hilarious name. They had a toilet seat cover, a ration of toilet paper, and a bag with the scent killing rice or kitty litter or something in it. Thinking now, the kitty litter is probably the best comparison because that's exactly how it worked. We built these housings that were a dark, empty shell of wood that had a hole cut in the middle of it that was shaped like a toilet seat. You would place your bag there, sit, and take care of business. Genius, really. Okay, enough about pooping, I guess. I don't want to gross you out any further. Well, that's not totally true. I do want to, but I don't have anything else right now that's gross to share. After seeing all the base necessities, I went to the kitchen. As the cook, that's where I would be doing my dirty work. There was a guy already there. His name was Jonez. Password protected. Jonez was a cool guy. He was actually a sailor, U.S. Navy, which caught me all the way off guard because I was thinking, why is he here of all places and not on a boat? Also, he was wearing our uniform and colors with Navy grip tape. I'm thinking this dude is 8 all the way up. 8 up equals military lingo for doing or wearing something improperly. But I got to talking to him and he was a Navy E6, which is an NCO and one rank from being a senior NCO. Been in the Navy for many years with lots of different experiences. He was an African guy, but I can't remember from where exactly. I asked him what language they spoke and he said bad English. Made me chuckle as he told me because I figured they would have been speaking a language native to the country at least. So when I arrived, Jonez helped me to get acclimatized to the new settings I was in. He showed me how the gas worked and how he went about preparing the food in the kitchen, all the tools available to me and generally what he prepares at what times, so on and so forth. Admittedly, this was a good experience overall. You see, until this time, I had only been making food in a garrison setting. When we went to the field, we cooked outside, but we used equipment designed for it, so there was a predictability to it. Basically, we knew every time what to expect. With a deployment like this, all bets are off. And not only that, but this was my first and last combat deployment, so I had nothing to call back from for inspiration or ideas. This forced growth on me that, although wouldn't really be needed again, at least so far almost 7 years later, if ever in any kind of situation like this again, I'll be a lot better off. But also, just the mental maturity from it all spurred on a lot of growth in me in various ways and my outlook changed, but more on that as we progress. He introduced me to one of the locals who lived on base with us. This guy was probably like 17 or 18. His name was Sanala. He told me it meant friend of God, which was pretty interesting to me at the time. He's the guy that would help clean the dishes and get water and help maintain the place with Jonez and I. He was a good guy and a big help as you'll come to know because I was getting stressed as this deployment went along. Trust me, I won't leave that out. So after meeting Jonez and Sanala, I made my way to the other side of the base and finally went inside. It was the gym. Now for those who may not know, the gym during a deployment is equal to, if not more important than, having toilets. I'm not even kidding. Especially when you're serving with any special forces soldiers. They train their bodies, eat as well as they can, and kill when they're called to do so. It's pretty straightforward, but it's no easy feat to get where they are. I was impressed with the amount of equipment that was available to us in that place, but thinking back now, I have to remember that it's a necessity beyond toiletries. During this time, I was determined to change my body and get really big and strong upon my return home. I wish I knew then what I know now. I'm much better off now, but oh well. They had the guard towers up, which were a 24-hour duty, which was a troublesome thing. When I was in basic training, we had this thing called fire guard. Every night past a certain point, we had to have one person up to make sure if anything went awry, we were able to react quickly and blah blah blah. At the time I thought this is just another thing designed to break us down, keep us perpetually fatigued. What I hadn't considered was that there was an actual utility to this. The chances that you might deploy and have to keep watch 24 hours a day. There was a man in that tower for every second of every day for the whole of our deployment. The shift started off as 2 hours, I believe, and after a certain point, I think they went up to either 3 or 4 hours. The sacrifice of time now meant that we would all be able to relax a little bit more or have more consistent sleep. Yeah, it kind of sucked, but it was worth it since we had to do it anyway. It wasn't terrible all the time sitting in there, but because I was the cook, it ensured that my free time was less than everyone else's. I had to make 3 hot meals a day and be in the guard tower. It was a tough thing to handle, especially as time went on, and I was underappreciated, but again, more on that later. The guard tower had some interesting toys in there, though. The Special Forces guys left their night vision scope that worked both in black hot and white hot thermal images. Also kind of eerie at night depending on what tower you were in. There was this one on the back of the base and it faced the mountainside. You could hear animals and whatnot out there, but I don't know. Something about it really creeped me out. I had my headphones with me and I would listen to audiobooks to sort of drown out the silence, and it really helps to calm me down. Again, the thermals helped because unless the moon was out, it was pitch black at night. But when the moon was out, like a full moon, you would swear it was still daytime. It was so bright. Now, this may sound strange, but those bright full moon nights was one of my favorite things about Afghanistan. Take away the fear of killing, war, and death in that situation, and there was still beauty all around you. You just needed to be looking for it. I wish that there was not an excess of light pollution in the States, because then we would be able to enjoy such beauty at night at any given time. So my first day comes at the new site, and I remember the NCOs having a talk with us, basically saying that we need to make sure we are doing well around these SF guys. Can't be holding them back just because we're big army and whatnot. Exceed the standard, don't just meet it. It's always annoying to hear someone ask more of you when you're already being asked so much, but whatever. I can complain now that I'm out the army. So one of the first things was to get our soldier center up and running. This gave us access to phones and computers with internet. It was so awesome to have that. Get in line, see what's going on outside of this remote mountainside village place. Besides having some internet and phone access, the absolute best thing about this place was that there was a TV, a Nintendo GameCube, and Super Smash Bros. Melee. Now, if you're not a gamer, or if you've never played this game and there's no nostalgia, I can understand your lack of excitement. However, anyone with those experiences knows the awesomeness of this game and what it meant to have 4 controllers. 4 working controllers. It was a small thing. Someone's family member or friend from the previous group sent that to them and they left it for us. Or maybe it was someone who adopted one of the soldiers who sent it. Quick side note, as I was waiting to board the first plane to leave for Afghan land, this group of people set up at stalls and were asking soldiers if they needed adoption. I was curious about this and decided to inquire further. I approached an older white lady and her husband, and they asked me the same questions. "Hey soldier, do you need to be adopted during your deployment?" She said with a genuine smile. I was embarrassed. It was strange at first. I didn't know what to say but to inquire about what that meant. She explained that oftentimes soldiers may not have families or people they talk to while they are away or to send them things that they needed. So this group of volunteers adopts soldiers so as to lessen the burden. Geez, people like this stand at the top of humanity in my eyes. These are the kind of people that have the potential to really affect positive change depending on how the energy is directed. I was blown away at their kindness and accepted it without hesitation. I had no idea what to expect, so anything that I could read, see, hear, or taste from someone willing to go that far for me was truly a blessing. And boy did they come through. They will appear here many times as I sing their praises for the loving care packages they sent for me. So with our media room built up, phones and internet and even video games, we were able to kick back and relax when time would allow. It was not that bad. Could have been much worse, and I'm thankful that it wasn't.